Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Today on the show, I would like to welcome Meredith Heller, who is a poet, educator, and author. Her book, Writing by Heart, A Poetry Path to Healing and Self-Discovery, was recently published by New World Library. I am so excited to have this conversation with you today, Meredith. So let's jump right in and welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Summer. I'm happy to be here with you.
I am so happy to have this conversation with you. So let's begin by asking you this question. If you could describe your life, your journey in one word, what would that word be and why?
Such a great question. Everybody should be given that question when they're born and when they die.
Ooh, that's a good thought.
I would have to say trust. My journey has been a journey of trust, trusting myself, trusting the life force, trusting the process that it takes, that we go through to become who we really are. And for me, that's more about shedding who I'm not than acquiring anything else. It's making space for the truth of life force to come through me in all the ways it does, and trusting the process rather than what I did for a lot of my life, I think, was be at war with myself and fight it with everything I had and feel totally alone. And it's been quite a journey.
Let's talk about that journey. Let's talk a bit about your background, because it is an interesting journey that you've had of self-discovery starting very early on, and how you took a unique path towards healing and self-understanding. Let's talk about that journey and where this began for you.
Thank you so much. I left home when I was 12 and raised myself. I came from a dysfunctional family, and I knew that there were other ways of being and communicating that I needed to learn that I wasn't going to get in my family. I also learned differently than most of the kids at school. So I had problems learning in school. I could not learn. My brain didn't work when I was sitting in a chair. And they didn't take well to my dancing in the back of math class to learn fractions. They didn't like that.
You're a neurodiverse learner, and that's great. A lot of times that wasn't recognized, especially the time we were growing up. Tell us more. So your journey goes on. You left home at a very early age.
Left home at 12, and basically I lived in the woods along the Potomac River in Maryland, 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. I built domes in the woods where I lived based on Native American sweat lodges. I lived in abandoned houses along the Potomac River and old barns. And I was 12, 13 years old. I was very alone, very lost, confused. I had huge depression, and all my best friends were dying of suicide and overdose. And this is really when poetry found me. I'm also a singer-songwriter. So between writing poetry and writing song lyrics, this was how I began to take the overwhelming feelings of loss and aloneness and be able to name them, and then be able to look at them one degree of separation out of the chaos and have something that reflected back to me who I am and where I'm at. This is how poetry saved my life. My first book, Write a Poem, Save Your Life, tells a lot about this journey. I realized the other day that the first book, Write a Poem, Save Your Life, I wrote in blood. And the second book, writing by heart, I've written in honey. And it's the journey from survival to love. And I think that so many of us are on this journey. Like one of my mentors, Ram Dass, says, we're all just walking each other home. And for me, writing is about walking home to love, to my heart, to trust.
I love that. Oh my goodness. So I have a little bit of a script here, but I'm going to kind of go off my own script. This is a journey. You were so young, and you said poetry found you. How did you have enough clarity to say, I'm going to embrace this? I'm going to invite this into my life and not push it away and name it? Because I think that is so valuable. I talk about emotions a lot, and a lot of times we don't even know how to name things, and especially our emotions. So, how did you do this at such a young age? It's amazing.
It's such a beautiful question, Summer. Thank you. It brings up, it makes me want to write another book, and I don't want to right now. But you write that book, Summer.
Okay.
You write that book, because that is such a beautiful question. And it's two-part, really. The first answer that is true for me is that I didn't have a choice. And I think that with a lot of creatives, with a lot of writers, a lot of musicians, it is something that we come into this life having made a vow with. And it is what gives us our life force. It is as necessary as food and water. So that's one part of the answer. I don't know that it was a choice. I so appreciate the question, and I have to write. Writing is how I breathe. The other piece of the answer is I started writing when I was about 5. I would sit down in the basement of my family home all by myself as a 5-year-old kid when I got home from school. And I wrote short stories. I was very creative. I had a very large imagination. I had imaginary friends. I had imaginary siblings. And I wrote the stories about them. It's something that came very naturally to me. So I think that when I was alone, so young, living out in nature by myself with no support system, nothing to hold on to, no stability, and watching life and my friends disappear and die, my two closest companions, what allowed me to survive was nature, which is still my temple every day of my life, and writing. And these were my two closest companions. And I would say they still are.
Thank you so much for that answer and for sharing that with the audience. You know, so meaningful, and we each have our own path. We each have our own journey, and we each have our own process. You write about how writing is a journey towards wellness, self discovery, and is, in fact, the medicine inside of us. Tell us more about this ideology and this practice for you.
Thank you. So beautiful. So I love how you ended that question on practice, because it brings up a really good point. I tell this in the introduction to Writing by Heart. I had a yoga teacher who always said, this is not a yoga perfect. This is a yoga practice. And that hit home for me, and I made it mine. And so I start every workshop and the beginning of this book. This is not a writing perfect. This is a writing practice. And we make room for experimentation, exploration, self-discovery, lots of mistakes, lots of things that we said, well, that's a terrible piece. Cool, throw that one out. Wow, one line in 3 pages that rocks. That's a good day of writing, right? So making space for ourselves in the reflection of our writing, which becomes a mirror. What's happening here? How do I tend to what I'm feeling? How do I get in touch with what I'm feeling, number one? How do I attend to it with curiosity, compassion, and an open mind, a beginner's heart of what is here and what can I learn about myself from what I'm putting on the page. So I'm not writing to write something great. I'm not writing to impress anyone. I'm writing to learn about myself, to contact deep psyche where the metaphors live, and then read this piece and go, wow, yeah, this is a good reflection of where I am. And I feel more integrated by allowing all the pieces of who I am to live here, right? So in workshop, every part of us is welcome. The sadness, the fear, the longing, the anger, the grieving, the joy, the passion, the glory, the belonging, the not belonging. It's all welcome. Being true to what's here. That to me is healing.
I absolutely love that because I was an English major in undergrad. And if I had taken a course with you, it would have been so much more enjoyable. And as you mentioned, holistic. It is an integration. It is a lot of parts and pieces. And during our training of writing, we omit some of those parts and pieces and it becomes so technical. And this is what I've written here, and this might be your next book, is embracing the 3 C's of writing: curiosity, compassion, and courage. As you were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, here's a book in itself, because you talk about that and these different components, and you bring that into your writing. And I watched a couple of your videos as well, and how you recite a poem. And it's not just reciting, it's singing, it's embracing your other ways of creativity. And I was just like, okay, I had to watch it twice because I was like, okay, I want to get into a different mindset and I want to really open myself up to this experience. And as I did, and hearing you sing your poem, I was just like, this is phenomenal. I'm really loving this.
I'm so touched. Thank you so much. That
Absolutely.
is so beautiful. And the fact that you said the way I deliver the poem is singing. Singing was my first language. I actually sang before I spoke as a child.
Ah,
Thank you so much. Did you say compassion, creativity, and
curiosity, compassion, and courage is what I said.
curiosity,
Yeah, compassion
compassion,
and
and
courage.
courage? That
Yeah,
is
the 3 C's to
gorgeous.
writing.
Thank you for reflecting that one back.
Absolutely, because as you mentioned certain things as you were talking, I thought, my goodness, just as a trained writer and the way that you write, it's very, this goes on to my next question,
Yeah.
is writing a process of meditation of sorts, which supports your calm, peace, and balance for wellness and that mental health, that physical health for you. Because as you're talking, I just feel wellness. I feel wholeness. For you, I'm hearing it brings these things, this wellness to your life.
Oh, absolutely. It really is like you mentioned before, and like I say in my book, writing is magic. Writing is medicine. This is the medicine that brings me into this wholeness we're talking about. Where else can you voice everything that comes up with such honesty except in this commitment and communion with yourself on the page? You could write a rant of anger and burn it if you don't want anyone to see it, or take it to the open mic in town, right? It's
Yeah.
your choice, but a place of absolute honesty where you can voice, which I believe, especially as women, is our power to speak up and out for who we are, what we want, what we need, in the ways we need it and want it. I mean, that to me is the beauty of aging. I told you I'm about to be 60, and I feel like I have just arrived.
That's so exciting. I love
Amen.
that. That is so
Thank you.
exciting. It's exciting for me because I am going to be 55 this year. I feel the same way, like in what I do, that I am arriving. I'm going to get into my next question, which is, tell us about Writing by Heart, a poetry path to healing and self-discovery, and who or what was your inspiration or muse for this book?
Oh, I love it. I
Thank you.
love Muse. The very next workshop, which starts February 27th, is called Spark the Muse, by the way. So we're right, we're in tune here.
Yeah, we are.
My muse for this book is the warrior women poets who come to my workshops.
Mm.
I had moved down to the California desert for a year near Joshua Tree 2 years ago. It was very dry, physically and metaphorically. I was a
Mm.
little too lonely, realized I'm not a cactus, I'm a fern, which is why I came back to Marin County, where it's actually raining and green today.
Yeah.
And while I was there in my dry desert aloneness, I sat down and I looked at the couple of years of workshops I'd been teaching for women. I was a poet in the schools teaching first through 12th grade for
Mm.
30 years, first in Boulder, Colorado, and then in Marin County, California. When COVID hit us and all the classes went on Zoom, we did that for a couple of years. And the poor kids, Zoom zombies. I was a Zoom zombie. Everyone was Zoom zombies. I was teaching 6, 7 classes on Zoom a day to the kids. Oh my gosh. And I burned out. I put it on hold. And I specialized in working with teen girls at that time. One of those mothers said, Meredith, would you teach a workshop for her and her women friends? And I said, I don't know if I know enough. And she said, oh, Meredith, we've been sitting outside our daughter's doors listening to you teach their workshop secretly for years. You know enough. And so we started the first workshop in October of 2020 with 8 women. We now have 5 cohorts.
Mm.
And the workshops are a series of 5 weeks where we meet once a week for 5 weeks, 2 weeks off for me to create the new workshop. And we roll this way through the whole year. So there I am in my dry desert place, realizing I'm not a cactus. And I'm looking at through the workshop stuff. And I said, this is amazing. The invitations got people totally alive and sparked creatively. And the poems that the women in the workshops write break my heart open into greater aliveness. And, I had this much material, and I thought, if I don't write the book now, it's going to be too much. I'm going to be overwhelmed. And it is time to share this work with the world. So it's the warrior women poets who come to workshop, whose example poems are through this whole book. I wrote this whole book and I gave it to my publisher, and she said, Meredith, you didn't include any of your poems in here. And I said, no, I just put the women from workshop. She said, you can put some of yours. It was like I didn't even think to put mine. I have my own poetry
Wow.
books that get
Yeah.
published. So they are the muse. The women in the workshops are my muse. They keep me creatively bubbling up with every new workshop, every new idea. And this book is really a celebration to them,
Mm.
to invite more people and more women to workshops and more people in general to find this medicine, to find this wholeness.
What an amazing way to find that medicine and go through that journey, and also understand that whatever we write, there's no mistakes. It's always what I like to say in everything that we do, it's gain wisdom. I really don't use the word mistake because I believe that the things that we write, the things that we do, the journey we take, if we can look back and reflect and say, okay, this is what I'm taking from this is what I'm learning, and this is how I can apply it. And I love that we each have our own process. And you also provide a space with the freedom to really explore that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And any form of writing is welcome. I say poetry these days as an umbrella term for reflective, personal, expressive writing that allows us to really look at what's bubbling up in my belly and my heart right now. Sometimes people get intimidated by the word poetry. We do every kind of form and formlessness and make up your own form. Story, mind spill, heart spill, prose, song lyrics, jag it across the page and, bring it to life. Any form is welcome, just right.
So, as we come to the close of this interview, my last question for you, Meredith, is if you were to give the listeners just one tip to write for healing and self discovery, what would it be?
Just start. Start with wherever you are and befriend yourself in your writing. Listen to yourself and speak back to yourself with the deepest kindness, as if you are your own child, your own little sister, your own cat, whatever you know how to be the most loving to. Give that to yourself in your writing, and it will feed you 1,000-fold. I promise.
Thank you so much, Meredith, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
I had such a great time talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You can follow Meredith Heller on Instagram at Meredith Heller Poetry, on Facebook at meredith.heller.5, as well as Meredith Heller Poetry and at meredithheller.com. You can also find her book at most retailers, to include Amazon.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.